One summer moment can change a child's life. Through Toys for Tots Give and Go initiative, your support provides books, games, toys, and outdoor adventures that spark curiosity, creativity, and a love of nature. Whether it's fishing, learning a new sport, reading under a tree, or playing with friends, these moments build confidence and lifelong memories. For too many children, those moments never come. You can help change that this summer. Visit toysfortots.org. Toys for Tots, delivering hope beyond the holidays.
Honey, what are you listening to?
Mom!
Your teen might not share everything with you, but teens share everything with each other. And certain everyday behaviors, like sharing food, drinks, or kisses, could mean sharing bacteria that can cause meningococcal disease, known as meningitis. Although meningitis is uncommon, about 1 in 10 who develop it will die. Ask your teen's doctor about missing meningitis vaccinations. Learn more at meningitis.com. Vaccination may not protect all recipients. Sponsored by GSK.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. You are now entering the Stone Zone right here on the Roger Stone Show. I hope you had as glorious a Independence Day as my family and I. I had my oldest granddaughter and my one and only great-grandson visiting, and we had an all-American barbecue and watched fireworks. They say that there are no second acts in America, but that's not true. If it were true, I wouldn't be with you. I read in this morning's New York Post that Michael Cohen is going to have a new radio show. And because the Bible teaches us to forgive, but not forget, I actually wish him well in his new endeavor. Live radio is not easy to do, and it is a challenge to keep your show lively and interesting and to get good guests. But despite the fact that Michael Cohen testified falsely against me multiple times, I bear no rancor. Few figures in modern American politics have undergone a more remarkable transformation than Michael Cohen. Once known as Donald Trump's fiercely loyal attorney, confidant, and self-described fixer, Cohen ultimately became one of the government's most important witnesses against his former client and one of Trump's most outspoken public critics. His story is one of ambition, disloyalty, criminal conduct, betrayal, reinvention, and now redemption. It's also a story that cannot be understood without carefully separating Cohen's own criminal behavior from the legal allegations involving President Donald Trump. There was a terrific interview with John Catsimatidis and Michael Cohen yesterday that you can listen to at WABCRadio.com, which I highly recommend to you. Now, Michael Cohen was admitted to the New York bar in 1992 before joining Donald Trump's inner circle. He practiced law, invested in New York City's lucrative taxi medallion industry. These were in the pre-Uber days, and became involved in various real estate and business ventures. By the mid-2000s, Michael Cohen had become the executive vice president and special counsel to the Trump Organization. That's when I met him. He handled legal disputes, business negotiations, and sensitive personal matters for Trump while earning a reputation for aggressively defending his boss in both courtroom and in the court of public opinion. He often referred to himself as Donald Trump's Tom Hagen, a Godfather reference. For years, Cohen publicly portrayed himself as unwaveringly loyal to Trump. He frequently appeared on television defending him and famously declared he would take a bullet for Trump. That loyalty, however, unraveled after federal investigators began examining Michael Cohen's own financial affairs in 2018. Well, I guess it was April 9th, 2018, federal agents executed search warrants at Cohen's home, office, and hotel room. The searches were authorized by a federal judge following referrals from special counsel Robert Mueller in the greatest single witch hunt and abuse of power in American history. But the actual search warrants were conducted primarily by the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and the raids marked the beginning of Cohen's spectacular legal downfall. Rather than contest the charges at trial, Michael Cohen waived his indictment and appeared before United States District Judge William Pauley. That was on August 21st, 2018, where he pled guilty to 8 crimes. Those convictions arose from his personal financial conduct, but also campaign finance violations connected to the 2016 presidential election, which, frankly, I question whether those charges were valid at all. 5 of the felony counts involved willful tax evasion. Cohen admitted between 2012 and 2016 that he deliberately concealed more than $4 million in taxable income derived largely from his taxi medallion business and consulting work. According to federal prosecutors, those actions enabled him to evade more than $1.3 million in federal taxes. Michael Cohen pled guilty to making false statements to a federally insured financial institution. He admitted providing false information in connection with obtaining a $500,000 home equity line of credit. That offense, like the tax crime, was entirely personal, and it's important to point out had nothing whatsoever to do with Donald Trump. The remaining 2 counts involve campaign finance violations that would become the most scrutinized and debated in criminal history and also political history. Cohen admitted arranging for American Media Inc., the parent company of the National Enquirer, to pay $150,000 to former Playboy model Karen McDougal in exchange for exclusive rights to her allegation of an affair with Donald Trump. The company never intended to publish the story, employing what became known as a catch-and-kill strategy designed to prevent the allegations from becoming public during the 2016 election. Cohen admitted this constituted an unlawful corporate campaign contribution because the payment was intended to influence the presidential election. I'm not sure I agree with that legal interpretation. Michael Cohen also admitted establishing a Delaware shell company known as Essential Consultants, LLC, through which he paid $130,000 to adult film actress Stormy Daniels, whose real legal name is Stephanie Clifford. That payment secured a non-disclosure agreement concerning her allegations of past encounters with Donald Trump. Michael Cohen acknowledged that this payment exceeded federal campaign contribution limits, constituted an excessive contribution because of its principal purpose was to influence election. But as he said in his interview yesterday, Michael Cohen did all these things under the relentless pressure of federal prosecutors, and that I can identify with. Perhaps the most consequential moment in Michael Cohen's guilty plea occurred during his sworn allocation before Judge Pauley. Under oath, he admitted that he carried out the campaign finance violations in coordination with and the direction of a candidate for federal office. Although President Trump was not named during the proceeding, the reference was unmistakable. Cohen further testified the purpose of those payments was to influence the outcome of the presidential election. President Donald Trump was not aware of any of this and has never admitted to any of that. Michael Cohen's legal problems didn't end there. On November 29th, 2018, he entered another guilty plea, this time admitting that he had made false statements to Congress regarding negotiations over the proposed Trump Tower Moscow project during the 2016 campaign. Cohen acknowledged that he falsely minimized the duration of those negotiations and understated communications concerning the project. I, too, was charged with making false statements to Congress, but no statement I made violated the False Statements Act because no statement I made, although I did make misstatements, none of them were material. In other words, there was no Russian collusion to hide, and therefore I had no motive to make a false statement. The difference is that under pressure, I decided not to flip and face the consequences. Michael Cohen did not do so, but he still faced the consequences. I understand the pressure. And as I say today, I think anyone can be redeemed. On December 12, 2018, Judge Pauley imposed sentence. Michael Cohen received 3 years in federal prison, a $50,000 fine, forfeiture of $500,000, approximately $1.39 million in restitution to the Internal Revenue Service, and 3 years of supervised release. During sentencing, Judge Pauley described Cohen's criminal conduct as a veritable smorgasbord of fraudulent conduct, emphasizing that his crimes extended well beyond the campaign finance violations, which I still question the legitimacy of, that dominated national headlines. Ultimately, poor Michael Cohen reported to the Federal Bureau of Prisons at the Federal Correctional Institutions in Otisville, New York, before being transferred to home confinement during COVID-19. He completed his conductial service and his supervised release. That was in 2019. Unfortunately, he was also disbarred. Now, I think it's important to distinguish between Cohen's personal conduct and the allegations involving Donald Trump. Cohen's tax evasion, bank fraud, and false statements to Congress, well, those were his own crimes. Those offenses did not allege criminal participation by Donald Trump, and none has ever been proved. Yet, years later, much of the same underlying conduct became the centerpiece of the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's false prosecution of Donald Trump. It's important to note that federal prosecutors viewed all of those actions by Michael Cohen pertaining to Stormy Daniels, and they elected to bring no action. That's either because they didn't believe there were actual crimes or perhaps the credibility of their chief witness. Prosecutors alleged that the reimbursements made by Cohen by the Trump Organization during 2017 were falsely recorded as legal expenses in order to conceal the true purpose of the Daniel payments. Cohen became the prosecution's principal witness during that 2024 trial, testifying extensively about his conversations with Trump, the reimbursement arrangements developed with former Trump Organizational Financial Chief Officer Alan Weisselberg, accounting records, and other reimbursement records. The jury ultimately convicted Trump on 34 counts of falsifying business records. That conviction, of course, is currently on appeal. Cohen's credibility became one of the central issues throughout those proceedings. Defense attorneys emphasized repeatedly that Cohen was a convicted felon who had admittedly lied under oath, lying to Congress, committing tax crimes, and committing bank fraud. They also argued that Michael Cohen had significant financial incentives to attack Trump through books, podcasts, television appearances, and other media ventures. Prosecutors countered that Cohen's testimony was corroborated by substantial documentary evidence, including emails, text messages, invoices, accounting ledgers, reimbursement checks, telephone records, and testimony from additional witnesses. Following his release from prison, Michael Cohen completely reinvented himself. He authored 2 books, Disloyal and the more recent Revenge, where he once again repeats false statements about me. We'll talk about that a bit later. He became a frequent cable television commentator, emerged as one of the president's most vocal critics. He has since come clean and has now says that he did all of this under relentless pressure. I'm going to choose to believe him. Some have asked me whether I'm upset or disturbed by the fact that he now will have a radio show on the same network that carries the Stone Zone and the Roger Stone Show. And the answer is no. Every man can be redeemed, and I wish him well in his new endeavor. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be back to talk about the most momentum 250th anniversary celebration of the greatest nation on earth on the other side. So don't go away.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone right here on the Roger Stone Show. If ever there was a day that proved the enduring genius of America's founders, well, I would say it was yesterday. From the rocky coast of Maine to the beaches of California, from the wheat fields of Kansas to the streets of New York City, Americans celebrated the 250th birthday of the country with joy, gratitude, and patriotic enthusiasm, I think unmatched in modern memory. Many in the left wing and mainstream media tried to poke holes in the incredible celebration that the Trump administration put together, but I was not among them. I thought that the president's speech at Mount Rushmore in the run-up to July 4th was spectacular. In fact, I still think it's time to put President Trump's picture up there, his image up there. There used to be an argument that that it would endanger the current sculpture, but more recent scientific studies show that it could be done. My good friend, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, has actually sponsored legislation to add Donald Trump to Mount Rushmore. Millions gathered yesterday underneath clear skies and mostly summer sunsets. Families spread blankets across town greens. Veterans marched proudly through main streets. Children waved American flags. I watched this all online, and it was indeed inspiring. Hearing the church bells ring, bands playing patriotic music, fireworks illuminating the heavens, the greatest single display of fireworks, I think, in history on the National Mall. It was precisely the scene, by the way, that John Adams, one of the founding fathers, envisioned when he wrote his extraordinary letter to his beloved wife, Abigail. That was July 3rd, 1776, one day before the Continental Congress voted for independence. Adams predicted that America's birth would be remembered forever with pomp and parade, bonfires and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other. He was right. Nearly 250 years later, his prophetic words came gloriously alive yesterday. One can almost imagine the old patriot looking down from heaven with unmistakable satisfaction as rockets burst above the National Mall. Small-town courthouses, county lakes, city skylines, baseball fields, beaches, farms across the country. Adams understood something that many modern politicians seem to have forgotten. Patriotism is contagious. Love of country cannot be legislated into existence, nor can it be erased by cynical academics or professional America bashers. It lives in the hearts of free people. Yesterday proved that beyond any doubt. The historic university was also arrived during a presidency uniquely suited to appreciate its significance. President Donald J. Trump has never apologized for America's greatness. At every opportunity, he has insisted that the United States is not merely a nation among many, but the greatest experiment in liberty, as Ronald Reagan called it, the shining city on the hill. As president, he has embraced the American 250 commemoration, not just as a ceremonial obligation, but as a national renaissance, reminding Americans that our history deserves celebration rather than apology. That leadership has added another dimension to the remarkable year of remembrance throughout the country yesterday. Americans witnessed exhibitions, historical reenactments, military demonstrations, concerts, educational programs, restored monuments, civic festivals, and celebrations worthy of the greatest republic in human history. I noticed that Elon Musk posted a great speech by Ronald Reagan where he talks about the fact that if liberty dies in the United States, there is no place to escape to. And I think that put it almost perfectly. For one magnificent weekend, politics gave way to patriotism, and Americans remembered that before we're Republicans or Democrats, conservatives or liberals, or even independents, we're heirs to an inheritance purchased with blood, courage, sacrifice, and faith. So, from the Stone Zone, we wish you a happy Independence Day weekend, and we'll be right back on the other side.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Back to the Stone Zone here in the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is one of my oldest friends in American politics, Army veteran Michael Caputo. He's a policy consultant and a recent cancer survivor who worked with the Department of Health and Human Services to try to stem and correct the early focus of the MAHA efforts on childhood cancer issues. But during his 40-year career in American politics, he served in positions across Washington, including working for Congressman Jack Kemp, who, let's face it, should be in the Football Hall of Fame. That's where I met him. Later, U.S. government sent him to a decade of international advisory work in Russia and Ukraine. Mike Caputo worked on the re-elections of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. He served in senior advisory positions in Donald Trump's 2016 and his 2024 presidential campaigns, and then later as Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at HHS during the COVID pandemic. My good friend was diagnosed with stress-driven metastatic head and neck cancer in September of 2020, and he, like my wife, who's also a cancer survivor, has survived, as has his family. Michael, it is great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, Roger.
So one of the things that really aggravates me is that anytime there is an effort to hold those who violated both the law or the Constitution in their manic effort to destroy Donald Trump, to keep him off the ballot, to break him financially, to put him in prison. That's called retaliation and revenge, rather than what I think it is, accountability and justice. You and your family were put through hell by Robert Mueller and his thugs. Fortunately, you survived indictment. I did not. They weren't able to fabricate charges against you, but they certainly tried hard enough. First, I just congratulate you for your survival and for your faith, which I know sustained you. And then to confront cancer, it just shows that God is good, is what it shows. But first of all, tell me how your family's doing and how was your 4th of July?
It was great, Roger. My family and I, we live down in South Florida, a little town called Ave Maria. It's a little Catholic town in the Everglades, about 11,000 Catholics, a beautiful cathedral. And we threw a 250th anniversary party on July 3rd, which was tremendous. Had a lot of fun. We jumped in the car, Roger, 0 dark 30 on July 4th. And me and my girls and I, we drove all the way. We're heading north to Tennessee to have a vacation. But we celebrated July 4th in Perry, Georgia. I don't know if you know that spot, Roger. You probably stopped there on a presidential campaign or another. But it was the hometown of Sam Nunn. What a great July 4th celebration it was. That is a town that loves America and loves its 250th birthday. Perry, Georgia is a great spot.
Well, as you heard earlier in the program, you had your own run-ins with Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen now launching a new radio show. Because I am a good Catholic, I have forgiven Michael Cohen for what I believe were his trespasses against me. And obviously the president appears to have forgiven him as well, which shows what a great man the president is. But he hit the president very hard, calling him a racist and a con man and so on. I have one specific complaint. Michael Cohen testified before both the House and the Senate that he was in Donald Trump's office in July of 2016, days before the Democratic convention, when I called that the secretary put my call on the speakerphone, and I told them that within days, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks would dump a massive amount of emails damaging Hillary Clinton's campaign. Now, there's a couple problems with this. First of all, he testified to that extent in the House, but then he told a different story in the Senate. Suddenly it became not before the Democratic convention, but in front of the Republican convention, a matter of weeks. Secondarily, phone records subpoenaed by Robert Mueller could find no such phone record, and Rona Graff, the secretary who allegedly entered the room to tell Mr. Trump that I was on the phone, has no memory of this happening. I can tell you when it happened. The answer is never. And of course, the dump of emails didn't happen in July. It happened many, many months later in October, which Assange had said in public in numerous forums was going to happen anyway. So it's not like this was some deep, dark secret. I believe that all of that testimony was prompted by prosecutors. None of it was true. Yet to this day, I have no rancor. I have 7 years ago, I have moved on. I actually wish him well with his new radio show.
Well, Roger, I feel a little differently, I guess. You and I went through this together, the whole Russiagate stuff. You took it harder than I did in our family. We've been through it a bit, but you and Nidia and your family, what a terrible thing you went through. And, the things that happened to each one of us, I call our you and I and others, the remnants of Russiagate, because it's still not over and nothing, there's been no accountability. But, the one thing that's true, Roger, is that people around the president were being pressured to flip and to say things that were not true in order to get the president in trouble. And, I hadn't done anything wrong. You hadn't done anything wrong. But we soon realized it didn't matter if we didn't do anything wrong. They were going to make something up about us. And they needed someone close to the president to parrot those lies. And they found that in Michael Cohen. Roger, you remember, you introduced me to Michael Cohen, I guess 2013. I hadn't met him yet. You introduced me to to Donald Trump in 1988. Remember that? In the New Orleans convention, what a time that was. But I went over, you introduced me to Michael Cohen, if you remember, late 2013, early 2014, because I wanted to convince Donald Trump to run for governor. And you said, look, we're going to run him for president in a couple of years, 2016, and I do not want him running for governor in New York State where, good Republicans can't be elected. But he said, if you remember, Roger, you let me pitch it. And you said, Donald Trump's not going to do that. He wants to run for president. And indeed, that's what he ended up doing. But when I was pitching the run for governor, hanging around Trump Tower a lot, I think you remember, Michael Cohen came to me and he said, look, I know Roger's probably going to win in your little debate about whether Donald Trump runs for president or governor. But Michael Cohen said to me, he said, Michael, I'll support your idea of Trump running for governor if you support me for lieutenant governor. My jaw dropped. I couldn't even believe it. This guy who really resembled more of a cartoon character or probably, a character from Goodfellas than somebody who would be a viable lieutenant governor candidate. But that's the kind of guy he was, Roger. It was all about Michael Cohen. And look, you're right. I'm in my readings this week, I read Matthew where it says unless you forgive as a Christian, God cannot forgive you or may not forgive you. If you don't have forgiveness in you, then you may not be forgiven. But I'm telling you, Roger, I'm having a hard time forgiving Michael Cohen. I really am.
Well, look, I think a couple things. I was opposed to Trump running for governor of New York because I thought the job was too small for him. Secondarily, I recognized his potential as a presidential candidate. That fateful meeting I couldn't attend because I had a detached retina, which I sustained in a boxing match, and therefore I wasn't able to fly. Had I been in the meeting, I would have thrown cold water on the idea. President Trump, then private citizen Trump, entertained it for a couple of weeks before deciding that he'd much rather run for president. Just 2 years later, he did. My good friend Ed Cox, chairman of the New York State Republican Committee, has brought this up with me several times, that he remembers it well and that I was right, that would have been a mistake, and that running for president, which many people thought was impossible, not probable, not possible, was exactly the right thing to do. So, look, at that point I had I had 5 presidential campaigns under my belt. I'd worked twice for Richard Nixon, 3 times for Ronald Reagan. I think there might have been a little jealousy there. I think Michael ran for the state assembly and was defeated. I think he ran as a Democrat, as a matter of fact. So I thought that was a factor as well. 2012 was
Roger,
not... Go ahead.
Mike didn't seem to understand how close we were, and we are, you and I. And I can tell you, I can vouch for the idea that there was real jealousy there, because by then you had 5 presidentials. It was clear there was going to be a professional campaign to run Donald Trump for president. I really do believe you're right. I think Michael Cohen came to this kind of interaction with a high degree of jealousy.
Well, and the other thing people don't know is that when I was charged, prosecutors got the judge to order that you and I could not speak to each other for an entire year. You were not able to communicate with me in any way, despite the fact that you were not a witness in my case, which was never explained. We asked several times, your lawyers asked several times to have that restriction removed, but they refused. So the idea of denying you the counsel of your best friend in this kind of time of stress gives you some idea of the Soviet-style show trial nature of the proceedings against me. I wasn't allowed to mount any viable defense. Ultimately, we learned, of course, this was 7 years ago. People have forgotten this. But the jury forewoman testified during jury selection and during the trial that she never heard of Roger Stone. She was unfamiliar with the charges against me. Yet we learned after I was convicted that she had been attacking me and Donald Trump by name on both her Twitter feed and her Facebook page, but she had them locked down on a personal setting so that could not be seen during jury selection. On that basis alone, my conviction should have been thrown out and I should have gotten a new trial. Although in the District of Columbia, in front of the same judge, I don't know that we would have had the same result, would not have had the same result. But I was prohibited from introducing evidence in my own defense. It's a horrific nightmare when the federal government, with its extraordinary power, targets you. There's very, very little you can do about it.
I can imagine, Roger. Look, I'm a fan of WABC, and I don't want to second guess any of the folks over there. I respect the leadership, but I don't understand this. To me, I can remember, by the way, during your after you were charged and the run up to your trial, the many things that Michael Cohen said in public and in private that were really adding to the problem and adding to the pain and adding to the lies. But I do remember one time, Roger. I think it's important for the listeners at WABC to understand what the treat they're about in for with their new show that's coming on. I remember I was on CNN and I was defending the president, and one of the commentators said, well, the man closest to him in his office, Michael Cohen, they said something like, he says otherwise. And it was one of those lies that he had told about the president. And I came back with a rather, I think, strong statement against Michael Cohen. And in the car, on the way back from my live interview in studio, I got a call from Michael Cohen, and he was laughing and mocking and joking about how all of us were going to go down with the president, laughing about it on my phone. So, listen, I understand the president is a merciful man. I mean, don't have to look any further than these pardons this week. He gets crap for these pardons whenever he gives them. But, Roger, as you know, he's a merciful man, and mercy is a part of leadership, especially in the 250th Jubilee year of the United States of America. We should be celebrating with presidential mercy. So, listen, I respect the president if he has found the room to forgive Michael Cohen for being such a lying, cheating, thieving flipper. If he can forgive him, God bless him. I'm having a bit more trouble. But as you know, Roger, we have to. We really have to. I'm not going to heaven if I don't, And after all the things you and I have been through, to not be able to go to heaven because we're holding a grudge against a small man like Michael Cohen, I'm not going out that way.
All right, Michael, we have to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. We're talking to my good friend Michael Caputo. Michael, I want to walk through this just for purposes of historical record, and that is the Hank Greenberg affair. During the 2016 campaign, you contacted me and said that you had been contacted by a man calling himself Hank Greenberg, who claimed that he had access to information that was embarrassing to Hillary Clinton. Now, in a presidential campaign, this kind of information comes in over the transom all the time. Some of it's real, some of it's not real, some of it's meaningful, some of it is not. You bugged me relentlessly until I finally had a sit-down with Mr. Greenberg, a sit-down that frankly was so brief that I actually forgot it. I did testify before the House that I'd never met any Russians, although I was never sure that Mr. Greenberg, not his real name, was indeed a Russian. We met in Sunny Isles, Florida for a cup of coffee, and he said that he had access to emails that were embarrassing to Hillary Clinton. And I said, well, I couldn't tell him what the value of those would be until I saw them. And he laughed and said, well, that will cost you $2 million. Then I laughed and said, well, you don't understand. If I had $2 million, that's not how I would spend it. And then he laughed and said, no, it's not your $2 million I want. It's Donald Trump's $2 million. And I said, no, you don't understand. Donald Trump's not paying $2 million for opposition research. Have a nice day. And I left. Only later would we find that Hank Greenberg was not his real name, that he was an FBI informant, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, and an informant for 10 years, Roger. First of all, I'm never going to live this down. I've introduced you to some pretty stupid people, but that was probably the worst thing I did. But, both of us forgot it because he was a clown. We couldn't believe that somebody would be such a clown and be an FBI informant. It wasn't until later that I figured out I hired a private investigator at the advice of my attorney. And we figured out that he'd been a FBI informant for 20 years and had been living in Miami all that time. And he had sued the FBI because they were late on paying him. And in this lawsuit in California, he detailed all of his work for the FBI. Now, when we figured that out, I think that took Henry Greenberg off the table for the FBI. Thankfully, I had a really good a private investigator who figured that out. But I think if we hadn't figured it out, you and I would have been in more trouble than we knew.
Yeah, there's no question. Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, he's had his own problems, immediately jumped on the fact that we had both forgotten this contact with a quote-unquote Russian. But then just as quickly as they brought it out, he disappeared. When you go to Mueller's final report, which BuzzFeed had to go to court to get released, it's reduced to one line saying that Henry Greenberg, not his real name, was not an agent of the Russian government. So they buried it very quickly. He was an FBI informant run in on both of us in an effort to catch us in some kind of illicit operation. But you can go to greenbergfiles.com, where you have posted all of the documentation that Mr. Greenberg was an FBI informant sent in to set us up. Welcome to the Mueller witch hunt, the greatest single abuse of power in the history of American politics, the greatest single dirty trick, and one that we have both, thank God, survived. I want to thank my guest, Michael Caputo, for joining us today. Michael, where can folks find you on X, your social media? Well, I guess we lost him there. All right. We will be right back. Thanks for joining us on the Stone Zone, right here on the Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Stone Zone here in the Roger Stone Show. I'm joined now by one of the true superstars of terrestrial radio, Bubba the Love Sponge Clem, introduced to me a couple of years ago by our mutual friend Tucker Carlson, is the host of the Bubba Army Show. Bubba was born in the small town of Warsaw, Indiana. He was a wrestler, played football in high school, and after graduation, he attended Indiana State University for a short time. He actually got his start in radio in Indiana through a DJ named Scary Gary Gray. His career took him to work in radio markets in Grand Rapids, Michigan, San Antonio, Texas, Chicago, Philadelphia, Orlando, back to Chicago, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, before finally settling down and putting in roots down in Tampa, Florida. That was in 1992. He went on to work at several different stations in Tampa, became syndicated in several markets across the United States and Canada. Bubba was honored with the 4 Billboard Personality of the Year award over the course of his career. His shock jock personality on the air not only earned him awards, but would occasionally land him in some hot water over the years. He briefly faced criminal charges for animal cruelty and was acquitted of all those charges, later becoming an honorary lifetime member of PETA. He also faced the largest FCC fine in 2004, had to take a small hiatus from radio. Upon his return, he hosted a show at Sirius Satellite Radio, later at Howard 101. Then he returned to the Tampa market. I can tell you this, when I was facing annihilation and I needed friends, and very few people would allow me to come on their shows to tell my side of the story prior to being unconstitutionally gagged by a federal judge, well, Bubba was there. If you're in the trenches, Bubba Clem is a friend you want to have. And he is also has an extraordinary documentary film entitled Video Killed the Radio Star, in which I have a small cameo role. You really must see this documentary. You can get it on Apple TV or Amazon Prime. Bubba came to mind because, well, it is a story in which Michael Cohen has a cameo role involving an attorney named Keith Davidson. But Bubba, first of all, happy Independence Day and welcome to the Stone Zone.
What a introduction, Roger. Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
Well, you are an inspiration. I learned a lot about radio just by listening to you. It is live radio, as Michael Cohen's about to find out, is not that easy to do. People think it's easy, perhaps because you can't be seen, but your show is lively, it's funny, it's entertaining, and you made one of the great comebacks in American radio. Very proud to call you my friend, and recently you sent me a ring from the Bubba Army. It weighs about 5 pounds. I think it's stretching my right arm when I try to wear it.
Well, you've been such a dear friend, my Roger, and you've been also an inspiration. You really, really do well on WABC 77. I find myself listening on Sundays specifically for your show, and you've picked up the art quite well. And again, thank you for the great introduction. And you're right, Michael Cohen, probably doesn't have any idea how this is truly an art form, and it's not about being a pigeon or a stool rat. It's about having some talent.
Well, look, I have decided after long thought and some prayer that I'm going to let bygones be bygones. If the president can forgive him, I guess I can. As I said earlier in the show, I think that very specifically when he testified under oath, let me just read this. Mr. Trump knew from Roger Stone in advance about the WikiLeaks drop of emails in July 2016, days before the Democratic convention. I was in Mr. Trump's office when his secretary announced that Roger Stone was on the phone. Mr. Trump put Stone on the speakerphone. Mr. Stone said told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange. I've never spoken to Julian Assange on the phone. And then Mr. Assange told Stone that within a couple of days, this was in July, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, wouldn't that be great? Several problems with that. First of all, he changed his testimony. He originally said it was prior to the Democrat convention. Then he revised his remarks to say, no, it was just prior to the Republican convention. That's a space of 3 weeks apart. And of course, that dump of emails didn't come until October, many months later. Robert Mueller subpoenaed the Trump organization's phone bills with great fanfare. A lot of stories written about it. No evidence of that phone call could be found. And the secretary who supposedly said I was on the phone, Rona Graff, has testified under oath that she has no such memory. Even in my trial, they produced no evidence that I had corresponded with Julian Assange. In fact, they kept that part of Robert Mueller's final report redacted until a federal judge ordered them to disgorge it, which they did. Bubba, they released this at midnight in a press release from the Justice Department on Election Day in 2020, the busiest news day of the year, a day on which it was guaranteed to get no coverage whatsoever. So, but despite all of that, I wish him good luck in his new endeavor. I heard a great interview with him yesterday. He now says that he's sorry for a number of things that he said, that he was under the relentless pressure of federal investigators, federal prosecutors. Believe me, my friend, I know how that can be. We each must make our own choice. I could have flipped. They offered me no jail time if I would simply testify against Donald Trump. I refused to do that. So I was a man staring into the abyss, and I thank God that he answered my prayers. The president saw that I was being pressured to bear false witness against him, that I refused to do it, which is why I got not only a commutation of sentence, but a full and unconditional presidential pardon. But tell us a little bit about your intersection with Mr. Cohen.
Well, it happens in December 12. There's an FBI sting at the Sand Pearl Hotel in Clearwater Beach there's a couple of former employees of mine that had stolen a sex tape with the world famous, infamous Hulk Hogan and my wife having sex. It was our personal thing, and two employees stole it. At that point, they had hired an attorney who is known for brokering sex tapes named Keith Davidson, and Keith Davidson started to extort Hogan's counsel and David Houston to the tune of $300,000. So they all decide to meet. Keith Davidson, David Houston, Hulk Hogan, and the two people, Mike Calta and Matt Lloyd, my two former employees, had retained a proxy, a girl, to represent them because they didn't want anybody to know that they were behind it. Well, upon being the FBI, Hogan gets a hold of the FBI, lets them know that he's being extorted. And at one point, Keith Davidson, the attorney, who later on had an unbelievable amount of correspondence with Michael Cohen, is faced down and handcuffed for extortion of Hulk Hogan for $150,000 down, and which would later turn into $300,000 upon the second payment, and the FBI arrested a guy named Keith Davidson. Now, Keith Davidson, at this point, for whatever reason, the feds, the FBI, decides to give him a no-pros and let him go free on this particular situation. So Hulk Hogan, myself, or even the people for that matter, never got justice onto these scumbags that had stolen my personal property. Fast forward that to 1 month after Donald Trump gets inaugurated in 2017, the Wall Street Journal in early 17, 30 days there later, does a hit piece on 45. And next thing you know, now the FBI starts digging deeper because they want Donald Trump. And so at that point, as they're digging deeper, they find out within their own agency that, oh my God, we got a no process on a guy named Keith Davidson out of California, and let's start leaning on him. So they start leaning on him and be like, hey, we got 5, 6, 7 years left of statute of limitations on your extortion of Hulk Hogan, where we let you go. We need any and all things related to Donald Trump. At that point, they find thousands and thousands of documents and correspondence with Keith Davidson, the sex tape broker, through to Michael Cohen. They go and obtain all of this correspondence that Cohen had with Keith Davidson brokering these various deals, and they go to a federal judge. A federal judge at that point sees the two-sided conversation. They know what Cohen has said. They get a warrant, and they invade Cohen's two offices. At that point, they got Cohen strung up. He's done. And unlike you, who did not testify against our president, he decided to testify against Donald Trump. And for that, he gets a plea, and they flipped a loyalist. They were able to flip a loyalist to testify against the president. And oddly enough, in closing, fast forward to Trump's federal New York trial, 2 of the 3 star witnesses for the government were Keith Davidson and Michael Cohen. And so that's kind of, my sex tape was used as the lever, if you will, to put pressure on a guy named Keith Davidson and to give up what he had on any type of correspondence or relationship he had with 45 at the time and Michael Cohen. That's how they flipped Michael Cohen using my sex tape as the lever.
Wow, that is, as I say, can all be seen in this documentary film, Video Killed the Radio Star, which I strongly recommend it to you. It's on Apple TV and Amazon Prime. I still have serious questions about whether those transactions, whether Trump had knowledge of them, whether they did indeed constitute a violation of law. Federal prosecutors examined all of this and elected not to bring so-called hush money payment charges against Trump, either because they didn't believe it was a campaign finance violation or because they doubted the credibility of their chief witnesses. It wasn't until Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan district attorney, decided to bring these charges. But even novelly, he had trouble identifying the crime. So it is yet another example, I think, of this relentless pressure that prosecutors can put on the average citizen. As I said earlier, Michael Cohen had his own problems. I have chosen to release any rancor about this. I think that is part of being a good Christian and redemption, and I have done so. I had to swallow hard to do it because, I'm half Sicilian, but I have nonetheless done it. Anyway, you're listening to The Roger Stone Show. You're in the Stone Zone. We're talking to Bubba, the Love Sponge Clem, a great friend of mine, a great radio star, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. Coming up after we finish with my good friend Bubba Clem, Bubba the Love Sponge, Tina Peters joins us. Tina Peters is, of course, the martyr for election integrity, recently released from a Colorado state prison where she was convicted of keeping evidence of election fraud. I kid you not. I prayed fervently for her release, and she has, through the leadership of President Trump and the demands of our fellow citizens, been released. So this is a big interview. We really look forward to having Tina Peters join us. Let me go back to my guest, Bubba Clem. Bubba, people don't understand the power of radio. I think radio is really underestimated. It still moves and reaches millions of people. John Katsimatidis has fought very hard to keep AM receivers in American cars, reaching out to the major manufacturers, General Motors, Tesla, and so on. And of course, the emergency broadcast system still operates on AM radio. But what I admire about you is that you have technologically made the transition. So it's not just terrestrially. You're also out there on TuneIn, YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, Facebook, Twitter, with the Bubba Army HQ. And I listen to your show just as you listen to mine. It's always entertaining. It's always light. It's always funny. It's sometimes controversial. People don't understand how difficult this is, do they?
No, and, I hope that the government doesn't. There's a big lobbyist, firm right now that's trying to get potentially AM removed from the OEM manufacturers. But, guys like, I work for a guy named John Cracchiola for JVC Broadcasting, who's kind of a mom-and-pop deal. John, the owner of Red Apple, as long as we have those patriots that are continuing to put on good programming and not putting on AI-generated nonsense, and they have the Roger Stones, and then they got the Anthony Cumias, and they got the Bubba the Love Sponges, then, talent does move the needle, and people want to hear things, other than, an AI-generated news source or an AI-generated, radio personality. And a lot of that is where the industry's going. So some of the the Sean Hannitys and the Tucker Carlson, some of the big, very talented people are still left in radio, and a lot of their inventory, if you will, comes from the AM side of things. So true patriots like John from Red Apple and you and I and what have you are in here trying to create good content, and content is king. And if you have good content, whether it's your documentary on Netflix, Get Me Roger Stone, or whether it's just, people appreciate good content, and, that's what we're guilty of doing, you and I.
Well, I think President Nixon once said to me, the only thing worse than being wrong is being boring. And he got that exactly right. My good friend, Bubba the Love Sponge, he is never boring. And he is, I say, a loyal friend. When the chips are down, you can count on Bubba. He's a good man. He's gone through his own share of adversity, but he's come out the other side. And I really appreciate him joining us today and telling the story. Once again, check out the documentary, Video Killed the Radio Star. Video Killed the Radio Star. You can find it on Apple TV or Amazon Prime. It'd be a great film for you and your family tonight. Bubba, thank
Roger,
you so much for joining us.
Just a quick update on July 22nd. Video Killed the Radio Star is going to be free on Tubi, so you can on Tubi you can just search Video Killed the Radio Star documentary, and it'll be free as a 3-part series on Tubi, July 22nd.
Excellent. All right, stand by for Tina Peters. Will join us shortly. Bubba, thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone.
Thank you to you and Enrique. Thank you so much, guys.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone right here on the Roger Stone Show. I'm very excited about this next interview. Our guest is Tina Peters, the former elected clerk and recorder of Mesa County, Colorado, perhaps the best-known local elected official in the country. She was elected in 2018, but in 2024, Tina Peters was convicted in Colorado State Court on multiple charges stemming from a 2021 security breach involving Mesa County's election equipment. Prosecutors argued that she improperly allowed unauthorized access to secure voting systems data and therefore violated state election security procedures. Peters and her supporters, such as myself, have consistently maintained that her actions were motivated by a desire to preserve election records and to investigate potential vulnerabilities, not to manipulate election results or commit fraud. She has repeatedly described herself as a whistleblower and as acting in the public interest. I myself regard her as a hero. She was sentenced to 9 long years in prison under horrific circumstances. She also suffered from cancer, but her conviction was later upheld on appeal, although the appellate court ordered that she be resentenced. After that, Governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, commuted her sentence, making her eligible for immediate parole, and all of those rosaries that my wife and I prayed were granted. Tina, welcome into the Stone Zone.
Roger, I'm so grateful for you. I mean, you stood by me the whole time. I mean, you're no stranger to being convicted on things that the deep state tried to make true that were never true. And so I know better than anyone how you understand what I've been through these last few years.
Well, I'm so happy that you are back in back at home and that you are well. And I got regular reports from our mutual friend Charlita about your condition and the circumstances. This really shows that God is good. What specifically caused you in the beginning to be concerned about Colorado's election systems following the 2020 election?
You know, Roger, it wasn't the presidential election. A lot of the mainstream media tries to say that I was trying to prove Trump's big lie, they say. But Trump won in our county, Roger. It was because we were 65-35 county, Republican, Democrat. It was the April 6, 2021, just 6 months after the presidential election, that really alerted me that there was something not right. And, and that has borne out to show with the images that I did before and after. A month later, a trusted build, they called it, that Jenna Griswold, the Secretary of State, and I would say the illegitimate Secretary of State, and Dominion Voting Systems orchestrated, and they deleted 29,000 election records, presidential election records, as well as the 2021 election. There were 36 wireless devices we found in the system, and the software in there that could easily flip votes with just a cell phone. So, the proof is still there. Anyone can see it on my website, tinapeters.us. We have the before and after comparing the two images. The images were legal. The mainstream media, Roger, would like to say that I breached the computer system. There was never anything, I was never charged with breaching the computer system, and that I had an unauthorized person, which was also a lie. As the elected clerk and recorder, that elected by the people of my county, I could have anyone I wanted in there as a consultant to make a legal image of the voting of the EMS, the election management server, which is what I did. So they would not let the jury hear the facts. Denied 41 motions. It was a kangaroo trial, really, which landed me in prison for 9 years, and they still oppose me. I'm out on parole, but I'm still under the thumb of the Colorado Department of Corrections.
Well, I certainly know how the kangaroo court thing works, and not being allowed to offer a robust and factual defense. I give you enormous credit. I know that your faith has sustained you through this. I was going to ask you if you received a fair trial, but I think you pretty much answered that question. What was the most difficult part of being behind bars?
I think seeing what was going on outside, seeing Mandami be selected, seeing Spamberger, I could have predicted she was going to be selected governor at 51%. She ended up being selected at 50.8%. I didn't have a crystal ball. I know how these machines work, Roger. I know how they're cheating the elections, and that's why they had to put me in prison for 9 years to try to silence my voice. And as a matter of fact, the judge, when he sentenced me to 9 years, said it was because of the words I spoke about the election is the reason why I deserved that I had committed a crime as bad as the violence that he sees on all too regular of a basis. So he violated my First Amendment rights, and by sentencing me to that length of time, or sentencing me at all for my speech, which of course is a constitutional right that we should be able to address or redress our government with our grievances.
Yeah, I was gagged for almost 2 years from making any comment in my own defense. In my case, the judge says that my public defense of myself might taint the jury pool prior to their being selected. Mm-hmm. But yes. If that's so, why did they leave the gag order in place not only during the trial, but also after the trial, after my conviction, prior to my supposedly reporting to prison? My constitutional right, not just mine. They also ruled that my family, my wife, my children, my quote-unquote supporters were not entitled to comment on my case, an egregious violation of my First Amendment rights. But that's the thing about the radical left. The rules, the law, the Constitution, the precedent, none of these things matter. When you are targeted by a vengeful and politically motivated federal prosecutor or state prosecutor, you can forget about your rights in a free trial. That is out the window. Based on everything you experienced, what changes would you recommend to improve public confidence in our upcoming elections?
Well, we have 4 months, and I just met with President Trump, and I told him, I said, sir, Mr. President, we have 4 months, and I said, based on what I've seen so far, we're going to lose the election if we don't get rid of the machines. And I firmly believe that. I've seen this happen over and over again. I have people that can sit there and show you the image, the Mesa County image, that can go in and show you exactly how they flipped the votes. And it's not that we have to prove this. It's already been proven over and over and over again, is to alert the public that this is being done, and we should not be surprised when we see Spencer Pratt, what happened to him, when we see Spamberger being elected, Mandami, and all these criminals being elected throughout our country. And it's going to keep happening unless we do something. And we have a plan going forward. I spoke to the president about it, and I'm hopeful that something can be done.
What would you say to county clerks and election officials across the country who may share your concerns but have a fear of speaking out?
Well, you can have a fear of speaking out now, or you can speak out and save our country. And that's really the way. I spoke at a breakfast this morning, and I told the people, I said, how many of you would be willing to risk going to prison to save your country? And I said, what God leads you to, he'll see you through. They tried to silence me, but God always has the final word. So we need to stand up now. We need to stand up now and make our voices heard to save this country. So, I know when people would travel around that were election transparency advocates, other clerks and election officials would say, well, we don't want to be Tina Peters. Well, that's exactly what they want to use. You know how that is, Roger. They want to do things to people, just like they did with the J6ers, to make them afraid so they won't take action. But that's exactly when you need to take action.
I continue to be astounded over our inability to pass the Save America Act. I do think that there are 50 votes in the Senate for it, and we're being held up by an ancient procedure called the filibuster, where it takes 60 votes not to pass legislation, just to bring it up to a vote. It's very hard for me to understand what could be controversial about a simple requirement that one be a U.S. citizen in order to vote in a federal election, and that one have a photo ID. Those both seem to me to be common sense, but the mainstream media continues to somehow describe this as radical or racist or designed towards voter suppression. It is the president's absolutely right about this. My good friend Anna Paulina Luna, the congresswoman from Florida, has attached it to several pieces of legislation. Seems to me this would be a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Great patriot. She is, and I appreciate that. But here's the thing. There have been so many people that have been what I call selected that benefit from the selection, that benefit from the system of the fraudulent machines and processes, the mail-in voting, the automatic voter registration, motor voter, they call it. So many things with the registration database. You know, when I was running for Secretary of State, I said, I've got to run into the belly of the beast. We saw them flip votes in my election in real time. But I said, you can't sweep a dirt floor. You have to completely wipe out the registration database so that they're not able to vote for people, without their knowledge. We were, as a clerk, we were not allowed to get into the voter registration database from the time the election started until after it was certified, because they get in there and they monkey around. They make inactive voters active. They vote for them. Then they bring in the mail ballots to make up the difference to get the outcome that they want. They use the machines to actually flip the votes, and we can demonstrate that within minutes how that is exactly done. And the public is largely unaware of it. And that's the thing that they were so afraid, and the reason that Phil Weiser, the AG of Colorado, who's now just won the primary for governor, and the Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, who now won the primary for Colorado AG, they're so afraid and have been vocal about me not being released from prison. Interesting thing about that, Roger, is that Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado, pardoned 35 killers, 35 people that had murdered, done egregious crimes, 35 of them. 9 people, he commuted their sentence. He commuted mine down to 4.5 years. I should have never even had anything more than probation for the trumped up charges that they did. Are the people, the left, screaming about the murders that were let loose on the street? No. I'm the only one that they have a vehement opposition to being released, and that's because they know I'm a dangerous woman in respect of I have the truth, and they don't want people to know what they're doing.
Well, I know this case has taken an enormous personal toll on your reputation, your finances, and your personal life. I thank God for the outcome, and now actually I think they have turbocharged your voice. They have made you more influential, not less. Rather than silence you, they have given you a megaphone, and I think your voice is going to be extraordinarily important going into these next elections. When we come back, I want to talk to Tina Peters about where we go from here, because this is a federal problem, but states actually regulate the state elections. We're listening to Stone Zone. We're talking to Tina Peters. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone here on the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Tina Peters. And I thank God that Tina Peters was released from a Colorado state prison. President Trump pardoned you, although that pardon was largely symbolic because, of course, he doesn't have the authority to pardon you for a state conviction. And I'm glad that the governor ultimately saw fit to resentence you, or I should say, release you based on a resentencing. I know that your faith, your family, your supporters sustained you throughout this entire ordeal because I've been there and I know exactly what it's like. But what is next for you? How can you best use the time between this and this November to ensure that the next elections we have are free, fair, and honest?
Roger, we have to pressure our representatives to vote for the Save America Act. That is the minimum that we need to do. There's more that we can do, but the Save America Act has to be voted in. There is no other way but to be transparent in our elections. People can go to my website at tinapeters.us to get more information, but they have to pressure their representatives to pass the Save America Act. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, it doesn't matter. This is America. There are people that are globalists, and you know this, Roger, that want to take down America. And by inserting people, I call them selections instead of elections, that's exactly the path that we're on. We don't want to do early voting. We want to do one-day voting. When I was running for Secretary of State, I wanted to, like I said, just do away with the voter rolls and have people go in to their local their local election office, show their ID, register to vote, and do that every 2 years. All this cleaning up the voter rolls and that sort of thing is just an illusion. And a lot of these Secretary of States have been put in place by Soros and other globalists. I'll give you a good example, Roger. In Colorado, we found that Republicans supposedly voted to raise their property taxes. How many Republicans do you know that would actually do that? We showed that was mathematically impossible. So it's not just representatives or elected officials that are being put in or selected into office using these machines and other nefarious methods with mail-in voting and all of that. But it is actually ballot initiatives, abortion, things like that the people really aren't voting for, but somehow these measures are being passed. So we have to clean up, get rid of the machines, pass the Save America Act, make sure that you check on your voting to make sure that your vote is counted for who you're placing your vote for.
All right. I'm afraid we have to wrap it up there. Tina, tell folks again where they can find you online and read about these important issues.
Okay. tinapeters.us is my website. From there, you can go to all my social media, X at Real Tina Peters, and you can see the shows that we've done to educate the people. But you need to call Washington. You need to call your representatives. They need to pass the Save America Act, and just keep making your voice heard. Roger,
all right, we have to leave it there. God bless you, Tina Peters. God bless you now that you are free and an important voice between now and November. Thanks, folks. Thanks for tuning in to the Roger Stone Show. Thanks for being in the Stone Zone. Until next Sunday, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?